also want to say representative, because we're getting like more diversity within this series. Like we're seeing our first black elf, we're seeing the first female dwarf, and I'm very looking forward to like looking at that.
Silly
Rabbit
Media.
Hey guys, Optimus Prime here. Welcome back to Primetime News. Today we'll be doing part 2 of the Rings of Power. For part 2, I wanted to analyze the diversity that was added to Tolkien's world. Unfortunately, lately, talking about diversity and what it could do to a story by interjecting it, it can be a lot like walking on eggshells. This is mainly because reasons for adding diversity nowadays is mostly to push an agenda, rather than improving the story or character. As we've seen in the distant past, having a diverse cast of characters can be a good thing, and may enhance the story or world you are trying to create. Adding diversity, just for diversity's sake, may ruin a story, not just for fans, but also the people you were expecting to draw in with the changes. 2 reasons why diversity changes may not merge well with the already built Tolkien world. Reason 1. One change can waterfall into many changes in aspects of lore and the world in fans' eyes. Reason 2. Changing a fictional world to more match the real world may break immersion. Let's take a look at 2 of the new characters that will be adding diversity to Tolkien's world. First, we can look at Arondir, an elven character played by black actor Ishmael Cruz Cordova. I'm sure he's a decent actor, but the addition of this character in this world will be changing the feel of not only his specific role, but to the Tolkien world as a whole. I know a lot of people bring up the argument of, what if we added white or Asian people to the Black Panther movie? I believe that this argument is valid, but I find it normally a crude way of proving a point when diversity has been interjected in other shows for wrong reasons. However, I believe the Black Panther hypothetical argument to be quite legit with talking about the diversity changes in the Rings of Power. Adding a different race of characters in a Wakandan race of people just wouldn't make sense. Wakanda is a fictional place in Africa and was created in the image of an African country that shielded themselves from the rest of the world. It would only make sense that the only people were of African descent. If Marvel was to out of the blue interject Asian people living in Wakanda, too many questions would pop out about them. Like, where did they come from? How long did they get there? Why did Asians come to Wakanda? Why did Wakanda accept Asians into their land when they were supposed to be hidden from the rest of the world? Imagine now they would have to spend a good chunk of the movie explaining this. Also, imagine the break from immersion this movie would have had if there was months of promotion stating how the Black Panther was going to add Asian representation. In the case of Black Panther, obviously diversity was not needed to be injected into just to push an agenda due to the fact that it already had a mainly minority cast. So why ruin a good story by pushing an agenda in it? The problem is when writers and directors feel compelled to push an agenda even at the expense of an established canon and or the story arc. How does the character of Arondir merge with the world of Tolkien? Well, the elven race has always been described and shown as mostly fair-skinned with the darkest being of olive, which makes Arondir inconsistent with the text. And even though Tolkien did not specifically mention all elves had long hair, every elven character's hair mentioned by Tolkien is described as long and flowing. Peter Jackson and the decades of Tolkien art that came after the books all ended up making all the elves with long hair, which nowadays seems to be the norm in the Tolkien cinematic world. And before you claim bigotry for talking about skin color and hairstyles, remember the same social justice warriors that have attacked Tolkien fans are the same people that attacked Smith for not being black enough, and Mexican actress Gomez for not being an Afro-Puerto Rican. Amazon made a mistake by releasing photos and news articles specifically pushing the diversity to the point that it made it clear their number one priority was pushing an agenda. The worst quote from the first Variety article was, quote, "It felt only natural to us that an adaptation of Tolkien's world would reflect what the world actually looks like," unquote. The problem is, when you try pushing and interjecting the real world into an established fictional world, you break the immersion, especially when you preach to the fans constantly about the changes beforehand. It makes these changes that much more glaring when you eventually get to watch the show. For example, in Avengers Endgame, we have representation from most races and both genders. Female heroines were found throughout the movie and in the final battle. Even the female hero Captain Marvel came in like Superman and turned the tide of the battle. Everything was great, and we had female representation, and one of the most powerful characters on the field was a woman. Then Marvel's late scene edition happened. The scene now had every female hero somehow coming together during a chaotic widespread battle, and no male heroes just happened to not show up either. The look of the scene, and the completely ridiculous notion that this just happened, was just a major cringe moment. This ruined the entire portion of the battle that female heroes were mostly in, and it's too bad, because up until that point, Marvel has done a good job of carefully handling female heroes in the overall story arc. This is a great example of how ham-fisting in diversity just for diversity's sake not only breaks immersion, but also is cringe to all fans, including the people that the scene was supposed to appeal to. In Arondir's character, so far the media pushing diversity so hard as a feature of the Rings of Power, it appears we will see the same ham-fisting of an agenda. With little we were shown of this character, Amazon made it a priority to show Arondir in chains in the trailer, which in another show may not have been a big deal. But with the onslaught promotion of diversity, people won't be able to help but think of why a black character was written into that situation. Again, breaking immersion. Also, a description of a photo points to Arondir having a, quote, forbidden love, unquote, with a human who happens to be a white female. Now, the story of a romance between races already occurred in the original trilogy with Aragorn and Arwen. The story was enhanced in the trilogy from the books, but still kept in the realm. It was a great love story, and the moral of it was that no matter if you come from different cultures and are two different races, love always wins in the end. And isn't that a diversity and inclusion story we all want to see? Two very different people coming together? It's a lesson that after the movie ended, we can leave and then apply to our real lives. And that's the key part. We take the lessons or ideas from it and decide what we want to apply to our real lives. Forcing our real lives into a movie doesn't work all that well. The Lord of the Rings successfully done this without having to break immersion from the movies, because Jackson used Tolkien's races and Tolkien's cultures. With Amazon's statements about bringing the real world into Tolkien's world, people will now see Arondir's relationship less about two Tolkien races making their way through their world, and more like a scene from Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. The second diversity person we see in the trailer and photo releases is the character Disa, the Dwarven princess. Of course, fans will point to the fact that dwarves lived in the mountains under the earth, making a black dwarf highly unlikely. Also, Disa does not sport a beard, which is a big feature, and one that sets dwarves apart from the other races of Middle-earth. With diversity promotions, fans are now forced to ask why she doesn't have a beard, and why yet another break from Tolkien's lore. Did they not want to somehow diminish a black actress by making her wear a beard? Is it they wanted to get away from the fact that dwarves kept their women hidden and rarely let them out in public? Tolkien was very specific that both dwarf genders were born with a beard, and that dwarf women looked so much like male dwarves that other races couldn't tell them apart. Bottom line, with diversity at the forefront of the writers' and directors' minds, we will be getting real-world themes in a fantasy world. This may backfire by making the diversity changes a giant eye roll whenever they are on screen. Now, I hate doing this, but I will give J.J. Abrams props for adding diversity to The Force Awakens, especially with the Finn character. Yes, there was pushback to Finn's character when the trailers came out, but that was mostly due to Finn was shown to possibly be the next Jedi, which would obviously bring up questions about his ties to Skywalker and other people. But when the movie released, it had a good amount of diverse characters, yet nothing felt forced.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
No pun intended. Finn was a decent character with a decent story, and not once pushing an agenda that wasn't consistent with Star Wars. Now I have to stop, because I'm throwing up a little bit in my mouth from giving praise to a Star Wars sequel trilogy. Another movie to look at is Thor and the character of Heimdall. Heimdall was race swapped with black actor Idris Elba. Now the comics portray Asgardians as white Nordic people. The lore of Asgard was that they were an alien race that traveled to Scandinavia. The Nordic people took the Asgardian leaders as gods and developed their own mythology from them. This lore left room for Asgardians to look any way they wanted and for Marvel to throw in diverse characters. But the reason Elba didn't receive backlash for the race swap is because not only did Marvel not push the diversity agenda to promote the movie, but also did not push a political agenda in the script. So what we're left with is a great actor playing a key character in a popular movie without discrimination or other flack. And isn't that what the social justice warriors are striving for? Or is it? I apologize for using words like will be and being so absolute about what we will see in the Rings of Power, as I know I may get the show hasn't even been released yet comments below. But with Hollywood and television's track record for the past couple of years, there's a good chance that the break from Tolkien's lore with the injection of the real world that's already been hyped is only the tip of the iceberg. I have only 2 suggestions to currently help Amazon here. First, stop promoting and talking about diversity and bringing in the real world into Tolkien's world. These promotions only prevent the consumer of being immersed in the Tolkien world when the show finally comes out. Second, begin focusing on bringing Tolkien's vision to the show, instead of trying to change his vision to meet your own. I want to reiterate, critics of diversity changes in The Rings of Power and other productions are not against diversity. They are not against minority groups, whether it be race, gender, or sexual orientation. What critics and I are pointing out is the activists taking over the IPs and turning them into propaganda. You want representation? You want diversity? You want equality? Then add diversity when it fits. Then when you're able to add that, work on giving those diverse characters a good script and a good story that fits the world the characters live in, not the world that the activist writers live in. If you do that, together, we will achieve true diversity and equality. This has been Optimus Prime. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please hit subscribe and smash that like button.